I get contacted by a lot of people that are looking to start training their dogs on stock. Most of them eventually either want to work goats, sheep, or cattle. So I'm going to give just a few tips that I would recommend anybody that's looking to get started on training their own dog, because sometimes you just don't have the money to get it sent off for training. I like to start most of my dogs in a smaller pen, such as this. This is a 20 by 20. You can go up to even the size of a 50 by 50. I like to start with sheep straight off the bat because they are just a little bit more reactive to dogs, and it gives that dog a little bit of a pressure relief, especially in an area such as this. So they're not as worried about being closed in with something they feel is going to hurt them. So if you start with cattle in a small area, you're going to be putting pressure on the dog from you, the cattle, and a small area. So I like to start with sheep just because they don't put as much pressure on a dog. You can use goats to start them, but I found that for the most part, goats tend to put a little bit more pressure even than sheep do. So I don't recommend starting with goats. If you're going to later work cattle with your dog, I do like to go from sheep to goats and then on up to cattle, because the goats will put pressure on a dog by facing them. A lot of them will challenge a dog. They like to split up, go different directions. They just don't like to be as cooperative as sheep are. Sheep tend to go together as a group. So I do like to work goats in the middle of switching over to cattle. I usually do about 2 to 3 weeks depending on the dog of straight sheep work. I might throw in some exposure to cattle in between that, but I don't like to put dogs on cattle first off, because many bits and pieces that a dog needs to know, the foundation part, before you actually get to working cattle. When I do start working cattle, I like to use a larger area such as this, and I like to use calves that are pretty laid back because they're not going to be as reactive to dog. They're not going to be fighting a dog. They're not going to be really running, and that causes the prey drive in the dog to kick in, or some dogs want to stop them, some dogs want to make them move. So, and if you have a dog that wants to stop them and calves take off, then you're going to have a bigger issue than calves that don't want to move, and your dog can push them and make them go. So I do like to work, this is about 100 by 200. I do have a little bit of panels set up here. I don't really use them for much. Some people come here to practice working their dog and they use them, but I don't work on panels or train for trials or anything like that. I'm working on foundation skills of making calves move and letting the dog understand that they are making the livestock move. Dog started in a smaller area. I switch over to this bigger field. I really don't know even what the size of this is, but I will switch over to this field because they want to kind of go down into that corner there, that gate, and hang out. So I will use this field to get bigger outruns, to go get cattle, sheep, whatever you're eventually wanting to work. I start with sheep, then I go to goats, then I go to cows out in this field. But this is where you get more distance on the dog and getting, because if you work in small areas all the time, your dog is going to think when you throw them out here, they're going to be like, oh, they're either going to go straight out there and don't listen to you. Two things are going to happen in this big field. They're either going to not listen to you when they get down there and do whatever they want to get the stock, once they get to the stock, or they're not even going to go down there because they don't want to be away from you. So that's why you need to work in these bigger fields, because these dogs, they're going to do one of two things. They're either not going to listen, or they're going to not go that entire way. I mean, I've not found a dog yet that just comes out here and is a superstar right off the bat. This is just a few tips on training these dogs, on even getting started, and what you're looking for as far as the facilities go. Can you do everything with just a 50 by 50 pen and then that big pasture out there? If you have the right livestock. If you don't have livestock that is dog broke and is cooperative about not running off or trying to beat a dog or even fight a dog, if you have that kind of livestock, you can just get by with those two things. But if you have livestock that either run or they will fight a dog, then you really need a different variety of pens to work with, because it's just going to make, you can do it. I'm not saying you can't do it. You can do it, but you're going to have so many ups and downs, and you're going to be so frustrated that most people will give up before they get to the point of actually having it done. I started, really honestly, I started with a very small pen and a big open field, like not even this size, like 40 acres. I started with those two things, and I had to start a green dog, and I started on livestock that didn't want to be with me and that would either fight or run. Cows would fight and the sheep would run. Either, that's where I started with. And I learned, I was just determined to make it work. But I learned pretty quickly that I was taking the very long route to get to where I really wanted to go. Instead of a straight line, I took a big, long, curvy road. It taught me a lot of things, but I would not recommend it for anybody just starting out.